Hi guys, welcome to the Channel of Love. Okay, I found us a new book and it's kind of coming on from the last book because it mentioned about the sumo wrestler. So we are going to read Sumo. Shut up, move on. I'll read you what it says on the front and the back. See if I can tempt you to join me in our storytelling time. Okay, a superb book. Alan and Barbara Pease, best-selling authors of Why Men Don't Listen and Women Can't Read Maps. Sumo, Shut Up, Move On. Okay, this is the updated second edition of the international bestseller. I've not read this book in years. Okay, The Straight Talking Guide to Succeeding in Life. It's by Paul McGee, author of the bestseller Self-Confidence. Okay, Sumo, Shut Up, Move On is the international bestseller that has helped thousands of people around the globe find the confidence and motivation to change. So how can Sumo help you? The way you think is a major factor in determining what happens in your life. Sumo shows that by taking responsibility, you can fulfill your potential, seize opportunities, enjoy relationships, succeed at work, and respond to adverse situations with a positive attitude. We can all dump the victim t-shirt, develop fruitier thinking, and ditch the idea that whatever will be, will be. Sumo encourages you to take an honest look at yourself and your attitudes because it's never too late to change and to start enjoying a successful life. Sumo offers heavyweight coaching with a soft centre, weighing in with humour, insight, practical tips, and personal antidotes. It is a thought-provoking and possibly life-changing read. Okay. The Sumo approach is powerful, simple, and effective. Anyone who reads it is sure to look at themselves and the world differently as a result. There you go. So I'm going straight to the first chapter. Here we are. Sumo, Shut Up, Move On. The Straight Talking Guide to Succeeding in Life by Paul McGee. This is Paul. About the author. You can buy your own book and read it, can't you? Yes. Preface. Feedback on the book. Introduction. Shut up, move on. I'll have to show you the images as well because there's images. It's like one of those little flip books that has the little image of the sumo. I don't think it is like that, but the sumo is kind of on the corner of the page. So this is your image. Introduction. Shut up, move on. What's he got there? He's got his drawing pins. Okay, drawing pins. Interesting. You don't have to be ill to get better. Eric Berne. I'm going to show you these quotes. I'm sure you can see it. You don't have to be ill to get better. Eric Berne. I spent 13 years at school. I learnt a lot. I learnt about algebra, how to use a Bunsen burner, how bad I am at homework. Oh, how bad I am at woodwork. A few things about dinosaurs and the joys of life under the Romans. On reflection though, I don't feel I learnt much about life and how to make the most of it. I explored the inner workings of a frog, but I never learnt about how to understand myself and other people. I learnt to stand up when a teacher came into the room and to hand in my homework on time if I wanted to avoid detention. But I wasn't taught how to set goals, manage my emotions, or how to handle conflict. For me, school prepared me for exams. It didn't prepare me for life. I appreciate a lot has probably changed in education now, but that was my experience. If you asked me a few years ago, would you like your life to be a brilliant and wonderful experience, both for you and those around you, I would have answered a resounding yes. However, if you then asked me how I intended to make this happen, I would probably have waffled on for several minutes before coming To the conclusion, I'm not so sure. But I've learnt a lot over the last few years. My answer now would be very different. Over these next 7 chapters, you will get to hear what my answers are. They are based on over 15 years studying psychology, running my own business, and more importantly, based on my own observations and conversations with tens of thousands of people. My job as a professional speaker and my experience of running seminars on subjects related to change, motivation, and relationships has given me a fascinating insight into what does and doesn't work in people's lives. My work has taken me from Tanzania to Todmorden, from Hong Kong to Halifax, from India to Islington, and from Malaysia to Manchester. Whatever the country, whatever the culture, I learnt this. People are basically the same. They have similar hopes, dreams, and challenges. They want to improve their lives, be happy, and create a better future for their children. Of course, there are differences, but if you dig beneath the surface, you find overwhelming similarities. So why sumo? A few years ago, I came across a phrase, sumo. I don't recall who said it, but I do remember what it stood for. Shut up, move on. To some people, this seems like a rather aggressive statement, but let me explain what I mean when I say shut up, move on. Firstly, I am not suggesting people simply need to get over it or pull themselves together, although there may be occasions where both these responses are necessary. Neither does it mean forgive and forget, or just ignore reality and get on with life. Sumo for me captures the essence of what I believe are the key truths around success and fulfillment. Let me elaborate. Let me tell you that a fly's just come up into my ear, or I heard this and then I have the taste of fear in my mouth. Let's carry on. Okay. When I was a child, I learnt the Green Cross Code. It was a code intended to keep children safe when crossing the road. I learnt the phrase, stop, look and listen. When I use the word shut up, I'm encouraging people to stop what they're doing, take some time out and look at their lives and reflect on how they are thinking and behaving. I want people to listen. Yes, be prepared to listen to others, but more importantly, listen to yourself. Go beyond the noise-filled, activity-driven, fast-paced existence of daily life and spend some time alone with your own thoughts. Shut up also means let go. As you read this book, there may be views and opinions you have about life that you have clung onto simply through habit. My goal is to challenge you to consider whether your outlook on life is helping or hindering you. The move on part of sumo is saying a number of things. It is meant as an encouragement for whatever your past experience is. Your future doesn't have to be the same. Tomorrow can be different from today if you want it to be. Move on is asking you to look at your future, to see the possibilities that lie ahead, rather than be stuck in the reality of your current circumstances. It's a call to take action, to do something. It's a challenge, not to think on, but move on, and we'll look at ways to make that happen. The phrase sumo now underpins my personal philosophy on how to make the most of life. It is a challenging phrase, but it's also one that is meant to encourage and inspire you, both in your work and personal life. Hopefully it's a phrase you will always remember. In Latin, sumo means choose, and I sincerely hope what you're about to read will help you make some wise choices in every aspect of your life. Let me explain my approach in writing this book. Firstly, I have aimed to make the concepts I write about memorable. For instance, I'm convinced there is not a book in the world that has the concept Ditch Doris Day. I have also included sections called the personal stuff. It's not compulsory that you read these sections, but I believe they bring life and colour and context to what we're exploring. They'll also reveal my own struggles and occasional successes as I wrestle with applying these ideas to my own life. To help you engage further with the material, I ask a number of questions. Your experience of this book will be richer and more revealing and rewarding when you spend some time, however briefly, chewing over your answers. I've also sought to make the material simple and accessible, so much so that my organisation now works in both primary and secondary schools, helping children use the principles. But behind the simplicity are some well-tested and tried tools and methodologies. Cognitive behavioural therapy, solution-focused therapy, appreciative inquiry, and the work of the positive psychology movement all underpin my work. But relax, you don't need an understanding of any of these in order to benefit from this book. So whatever your background or your experience of reading this kind of book, my goal is simple. I can hear a fly. Can you see it? I can't actually see the fly, but I can hear him. So whatever your background or your experience of reading this kind of book, my goal is simple. I want to provide ideas and insights that you can use immediately. Finally, although you might not notice, I have tried to add some humour. The ideas we look at are very important, but that doesn't mean we cannot have the occasional smile. Enjoy. Paul McGee. Chapter 1. E plus R equals O. Let's have a look at this character here. He's got himself a wheelbarrow. What's these flies flying around him? Oh, they look like arrows. Okay. Fundamental... Oh, it doesn't say that. It says foundation formula. Okay. E plus R equals O. Chapter 1. Has anyone ever said something to you and you thought, well, that's just common sense? Or ever made a discovery about how things work and thought, why didn't I think of that before? Me too. In fact, I guess we all have. One such ingredient happened to me whilst I was in my late 20s. I was listening to the author and speaker, Jack Canfield. Explain a concept that had a profound impact on how I saw the world and dealt with situations. On reflection, I realised that most people will think that what Canfield said was just common sense and fairly obvious. And maybe they're right, but here's the interesting part. Until that moment, it hadn't been common sense to me, and it wasn't obvious until it was pointed out. So what was this insight? This idea that has had such a profound impact? I guess you could call it a formula for life. For me, it becomes the foundation upon which my sumo principles are based. The formula is simply this: E plus R equals O. Now, in order to explain the formula and why understanding it is crucial to our lives, let's explore a scenario. Imagine you're driving in the fast lane of the motorway when you notice a car flashing its headlights at you. It's clear from their aggressive driving that they are not pointing out your car needs washing or you forgot your change at the toll booth. No, the driver behind you is in a hurry and you're in their way. So what do? I asked that question to a group of 12 managers I was working with. As you read their responses, ask yourself which, if any, you can relate to. So I asked that question to a group of 12 managers I was working with. As you read their responses, ask yourself which, if any, you can relate to. Cole said he would refuse to be intimidated, maintain his current speed, and not pull over for the driver behind him. He may even use a particular hand signal to highlight the fact that he didn't appreciate the other driver's behaviour. There were nods of approval from other members of the group. Brian injected, "Guys, I can't believe what you're suggesting. I'll simply move in at an appropriate time and allow them to overtake me." Before he could finish his sentence, pandemonium broke out around the room. "No way would you do that, Brian. I've been in a car with you," said his colleague Darren. "I know how you drive. It's like a battle out there when the traffic's busy, and there's just no way you would react in such a calm and submissive manner. And quite frankly, I wouldn't want you to, piped up another colleague. Losing the flow here. Listen, it's all good. We're going to carry on. I want to get this chapter done. So, Brian, clearly enjoying the reaction of his colleagues to what he'd said, added, "Hey, let me finish. That's not the whole story. After the car had overtaken me, I'd immediately pull back out into that lane and flash my lights at them." The room erupted into laughter. The energy and emotion of the group was quite extraordinary. A simple scenario had provoked such an animated reaction. Then Linda spoke up. "Guys, I've never seen such high levels of testosterone bouncing around the room. You remind me of a group of monkeys on heat." There was more laughter. "Seriously though, guys," Linda continued, "what Paul's just given us as a scenario happens a lot in our job. But whilst you lot are getting het up and animated about such an event, I'm using the same situation as my chuckle time." Linda's colleagues, all of whom were male, calmed down momentarily and looked intrigued and perhaps slightly bemused by Linda's introduction to the discussion of the phrase chuckle time. "You see, whilst you bunch of primates are seeing your blood pressure rise and your aggression levels soar, I'm having a laugh." "Okay, Linda," I interrupted, "you need to put us out of our misery. What exactly is chuckle time?" "It's quite simply this. In my experience, most people who drive aggressively, flashing their lights and tailgating you are men, and they're usually men in big cars. Now, I've got a theory about men who drive big cars. So when they start flashing their lights and start driving in an intimidating way, I will signal and move over. However, when they drive past me, I will take a momentary glance in their direction and think, small penis. You know what? It makes me chuckle every time." There were a few smiles in the room when Linda finished, but no audible laughs. Linda's way of dealing with a situation that was common to all of them seemed to put her colleague's reaction into perspective. I broke the silence and the slight tension building in the room. "Well, thanks for sharing that, Linda. I'm just relieved I drive a Mini." The room erupted into laughter again. With her humorous insight, Linda has made a valuable point, and one that brilliantly illustrates E plus R equals O. Quite simply, it's this. It's not the event, but also how I respond that influences the outcome. It's not an aggressive driver that's influencing my outcome, but also how I'm responding. One response can lead to stress and confrontation, whilst the other can lead to a calmer journey. Common sense? Obvious? Perhaps. But in my experience, very few people live their lives with an awareness of such a formula. For many years, I certainly didn't. In fact, many people seem to live their lives by an alternative one, E equals O. In other words, the outcomes in my life are down entirely to whatever events I've experienced. I have no control. Certain events will trigger certain outcomes, period. Okay, we've got some sumo wisdom. Life is rarely just about what happens to you. It's how you respond that makes the difference. I'm sure you can see that there. Okay, what's on this page? What events have you experienced? Have you ever faced any of the following in your life? Simply tick yes or no. Been made redundant. Experienced significant change of work. Not achieved your expected grades at school. Overreacted to a situation and then regretted what you said and did. Failed your driving test. Been dumped by someone you loved. Applied for a job and not got an interview. Missed out on the home of your dreams through no fault of your own. Found someone driving aggressively behind you. Felt badly let down by a family member or close friend. It would be surprising if from the above scenarios you hadn't experienced at least a few of them. You see, life is full of events. It's full of opportunities, challenges, setbacks, and even some dull, boring moments at times. But it's not the events alone that determine your outcomes. It's how you respond. Succeeding in life is therefore not a matter of chance. It's not whether fate, luck, or destiny bestows upon you a set of favourable events. It's about the choices you make. So what influences your response? Okay, let's get off autopilot for a moment, press pause and explore why we respond the way we do to events and how those responses impact our outcomes. Let's focus on 3 reasons in particular. Number 1, habits. Are they helping or hindering you? As you will discover in the Sumo Principle, remember the beach ball. A whole host of factors influence how we see the world and therefore how we respond to what we see. Interestingly, the filters through which we view our world have been shaped, influenced and coloured by a number of factors, many of which we are now completely oblivious to. Our responses to situations have now become habits. Habits which were not necessarily consciously chosen, but were acquired unconsciously over time. That's why even when we begin to understand the impact our responses have on our outcomes, it's still not easy to change them. To put it bluntly, our habits can handicap us and prevent us from succeeding in life. Okay, Sumo wisdom. To put it bluntly, some people have become a hostage to their habits. Let's explore that statement a little further. Imagine you're off for a walk in the countryside. You come across a field of tall grass. So tall, in fact, that it's higher than you are. You are tired and know that taking a shortcut through this field will get you to your destination sooner. Slowly and tentatively, you begin to move forward through the grass, and as you do so, you begin to leave a pathway behind you. Eventually, you make your way across the field and reach your destination. Now imagine that the next day you go for the same walk and come across the same field of tall grass. You decide to take a shortcut across the grass, across the field. You notice the pathway that you created yesterday. You know it got you to the other side of the field. It might still not be the most direct way through the field. That would be hard to tell without an aerial perspective. But you do know this path will lead you to where you want to go. But you still have a choice. Take the same path as yesterday, or if you're feeling particularly adventurous, you could create another one. So what would you do? What do you think the majority of people do? Create a new path or take the familiar and already established one? From my experience of human behaviour, most people stick with the path they took the day before. Why? Well, for a start, it's easier, and the majority of people like solutions that are easy. You also know this path will get you to where you want to be. It's also safer. By taking this route, you know what to expect. Now, of course, it might not be the quickest route across the field. There could be many others that you've not discovered. But it's a familiar one, and the one you're most likely to take. The brain works in a similar way. When you do a task for the first time, the brain begins to establish a series of neural pathways. The more a particular task or response to an event occurs, the stronger and more established the neural pathway becomes. That's why deciding to do something differently can sound easy in theory, but difficult in practice. It's like taking a new path across the field, and unless you see an immediate benefit, you're more likely to return to the route or behaviour you previously taken. Let me give you an example of this. If you were to clasp both hands together, you'd notice that one thumb is on top of the other. Try it now. Go on. No one is watching you. In my case, it's my right thumb that's on top of my left one. Now repeat this exercise, and if you're reading this book whilst on a train or plane, do this as subtly as you can without drawing attention to yourself or elbowing the person next to you. However, when you do so, whichever thumb was on the bottom last time, which in my case was my left, put that one on top this time. How does it feel? No, it doesn't say that. It says, now how does that feel? Strange? For most people it does. But that's how responding differently to events can feel sometimes. It can feel strange, almost not normal. The temptation is to revert back to how we've always responded. We stick with what we feel comfortable with. We go back to our familiar path. That's absolutely fine when there are no ramifications to your behaviour. Whether your left or right thumb is on top is not going to be the deciding factor in you getting the new job, managing your stress, or building a better relationship. But in many cases, how you respond to events will have ramifications. Just as Linda demonstrated with her story about how she deals with aggressive drivers, people can have very similar events and experiences, but have very different outcomes from each other. Go back to that checklist you've completed on page 13. Other people reading this book would have put ticks in the same boxes as you, but just because they've experienced the same event doesn't mean they've had the same outcome, does it? Here's the good news. You don't have to become a hostage to your habits. You can create some new pathways. There could be a quicker and better route across the field. Sumo wisdom. Just because a path is well worn doesn't mean it's the best route to take. Just because a path is well worn doesn't make it the best route to take. Procrastination is a habit, as is being continually late or losing your temper. But whatever your current habits that are hindering you, you can change. If you genuinely want to respond more effectively to events that happen, then look for ideas in this book to create some healthier habits. Here's the deal. Where you currently find yourself in life has been influenced by your habitual responses to events. And when you change the habits that hinder you and replace them with more helpful ones, you will see a change in your outcomes. Things can be different. Just remember it takes time and persistence to create a new pathway and form a new habit. The question is, are you up for the challenge? Now on to something else worth considering about why we respond the way we do to events. Number 2, conditioning, or you, me, and Pavlov's dog. Have you ever heard of an experiment called Pavlov's dog experiment? Don't worry if you haven't, but that's a question I ask my audience when I'm speaking, and I get some strange answers. They can border on the bizarre. They tend to have a common theme, however. The ringing of a bell is usually mentioned somewhere. However, one person thought the experiment involved the dissecting of a dog's head, after which, when the bell rang, the dog's eyes still moved. Another believed the experiment involved placing electrodes on a dog's testicles, and when the bell rang, the dog was either electrocuted or given some food. As the dog didn't know if it would be fed or electrocuted, it developed psychosis. Well, to the best of my knowledge, neither of the above experiments were conducted, certainly not by Ivan Pavlov anyway. Here's what happened. Pavlov, 1849 to 1936, was a Russian scientist based in St. Petersburg. He studied animal behaviour, and one experiment involved him measuring the salivation levels of dogs. Salivation, I think that's how you say it. Levels of a dog. He noticed that his dog's salivation levels increased when they saw food, just as humans may lick their lips in anticipation of a veritable feast. Dogs will salivate. Pavlov took one experiment further, using a variety of sounds, one of which is commonly believed to be the ringing of a bell. Ivan Pavlov would ring the bell as the dogs were fed. He repeated this over several days. Ring the bell, feed the dogs. Ring the bell, feed the dogs. Ring the bell, feed the dogs. Then came the interesting part. Pavlov then began to ring the bell and not feed the dogs. The bell rang, but no food came. The dogs still salivated. He continued the experiment. He kept ringing those bells. There was still no food, and the dog's saliva continued to flow. The experiment has been referred to as an example of conditioned response. Pavlov's dogs had become conditioned to salivate at the sound of a bell even when there was no food. In other words, their previous experiences had influenced their current responses. Okay, so what's Pavlov's dog experiment, conducted in the 1890s, got to do with you and me living in the 21st century? Well, quite a lot, actually. You see, in many ways, we're a bit like Pavlov's dog. It might not be the bells that cause us to salivate, but the media, our education, our upbringing, and who we spend time with can all influence or condition how we see, and therefore how we respond to our world and the events around us. Some of our responses to events come as automatically as Pavlov's dog's salivating at the sound of a bell. Rarely do we think about our response and the reasons why we behave the way we do. We simply tend to operate on autopilot without thinking. Sumo wisdom. Some people are sleepwalking through life, oblivious to their behaviour or the impact of their responses. That's why the whole Sumo approach is designed to help you stop, press pause, and think about what outcomes you want in your life and how taking control of your responses can create better outcomes for yourself and others. You see, we need to challenge the lie that says, I can never change, and learn to recognise we're not simply an upgraded version of Pavlov's dog. Yes, how we've been conditioned to see and understand ourselves and our world can have a profound impact on us, but it doesn't have to be permanent. If we genuinely feel dissatisfied with our current outcomes to events in life, then in a sense we need to change our conditioner. We can choose to change our mental diet and feed our minds on different information that can positively influence how we see ourselves and the world. By becoming more aware of why we respond to events the way we do, we can, over time, work on making better responses. This won't happen overnight. The Sumo approach is not a quick fix, instant cure, but it will equip you with ideas and insights to help you break free from what might have been an unhelpful and perhaps rigid way of responding to events. Okay, Sumo wisdom. Rarely are complex, long-term issues resolved with quick fix, easy answers. So that's a brief look at how conditioning. So that's a brief look at how our conditioning can affect us. Now let's explore a third factor. I want to see how long this chapter is, guys. See whether we're going to be exploring this right now. Still quite a bit left here. Okay. Let's carry on. Emotions. Number 3. Why sensible people do stupid things. I was watching a TV documentary called Neighbours from Hell. One episode featured 2 families, one of which enjoyed bird watching whilst the other family had their elderly mother living with them. One day the bird watching family noticed a bird in their garden they had rarely seen before. The father grabbed his binoculars to study the bird. After a while the bird flew into next door's garden. The father followed the bird through his binoculars. At that precise moment, the elderly mother was enjoying a cup of tea in the conservatory. She notices her neighbour looking into her garden. She spots the binoculars. She thinks she's being spied upon. Now, just stop for a moment and imagine it was you in the conservatory. How would you respond to the fact that it looks like your neighbours are taking a rather unhealthy interest in what you're up to? I'd give them a wave. Hi! Would you ignore it and carry on drinking your tea, leave the conservatory and go into another room, wave at your neighbour, strip off and reveal a part of your body, plant fast-growing conifer trees between your properties in order to protect your privacy? So, what would you do? And the response of one of the families, they grew those conifers. In fact, they planted so many that eventually the people who liked bird watching felt as if they were living in darkness. The trees grew so tall that they blocked out their sunlight. So what happened next? Well, they asked their neighbours to trim back the conifers. The neighbours refused. The dispute escalated and ended in a legal battle that went to court. The legal costs for both families totalled over £50,000. It sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? But it's true. Perhaps the most revealing insight from the whole episode came when one of the neighbours was interviewed. The case was featured on television. When my mother saw she was being spied upon, she was devastated. We had no choice but to grow those conifer trees to protect our privacy. Ridiculous? Possibly. Laughable? Maybe. But it happened. Sumo wisdom. Just because we know the best way forward doesn't mean we'll actually take it. Now a different response would have led to a different outcome, wouldn't it? Of course it would. But it's revealing that the neighbour felt they had no choice. And here's the key point. Whether we're going through a relationship breakup, have failed an exam, missed out on a promotion, or whatever our current challenge or opportunity may be, we do have a choice about how we respond. After all, we're not Pavlov's dog. No, nothing as ridiculous as the above scenario could ever happen in our lives, right? Our minor issues would never escalate into major ones, would they? Well, to be honest, it's at this point I start to shuffle uncomfortably in my seat. Fortunately, I get on well with my own neighbours, and fast-growing conifers are not an issue. But I have to admit that there are times when, on reflection, I'm left wondering, why on earth did I do that? What in the world was I thinking? How could I have been so stupid? Can you relate to that? Or what about the following? Cast your mind back to a time when a friend, family member or colleague told you about an issue they were struggling with. As you listened to them, did you find yourself thinking, well, the common sense thing to do would be to, or thought, well, it seems obvious what you've got to do now. Perhaps you've even offered an opinion that began with the words, well, if I was you, I would. But have you then found that despite your crystal clear, incisive perception on what to do, they then completely ignore you and do something entirely different? If so, why is that? Why is it that something that is common sense and obvious to you seems complex and unclear to someone else? Why is it that you can see that responding differently to an event could create a very different outcome, yet other people live lives with their blinkers superglued firmly in place, oblivious to other opinions and reciting their favourite mantra, well, I had no choice? Why on earth do so-called intelligent, well, in most cases anyway, rational, experienced people do stupid, irrational things? Why, despite all the opportunities we have, do many people fail to succeed in life? Ready for the answer? I guess it's obvious when you think about it. When the event or the problem is happening to someone else, it's easier for you to take a more objective perspective. The less emotionally involved you are, the easier it is to engage your rational brain. We'll look at this in more detail when we're exploring the Sumo principle, develop fruity thinking. But when you're emotionally involved, when the issue affects you or can have a significant impact on someone close to you, then you see things less clearly. You've heard the phrase, you can't see the wood for the trees? Well, another alternative would be, Your emotions cloud the view to your solution. It's like trying to complete a jigsaw puzzle through steamed up glasses. It's possible, but it's not easy. Sumo wisdom. Your emotions cloud the view to your solution. A way to represent the above would be as follows. Okay. So rational perspective is on the side and emotional involvement. Rational perspective is high. Okay, so you can have a look here. When there's no kind of emotional involvement, your rational perspective is high. So when our emotional involvement is low, our rational perspective is high. Conversely, when the emotional involvement is high, our rational perspective is low. In a nutshell, the equation E plus R equals O does seem like simplified common sense, and it is. But this insight can at times completely bypass our rational minds. It's like saying to a small child as you switch off their bedroom light, there's no need to be afraid of the dark. Rationally, you know that to be the case, but you're not the 5-year-old who's just watched the latest episode of Doctor Who and is left in fearing an alien invasion. Emotional engagement in an issue can have the same effect. We become less rational, lose a sense of perspective, and our judgment can suffer as a result. Okay, some points to ponder. Take some time out now to consider an issue or challenge that you're facing or have recently faced. Think about the equation E plus R equals O. Now answer the following. Number 1, describe briefly the event. Number 2, who else was involved? Number 3, how did the event affect you personally? Number 4, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 equals low and 10 equals high, how emotionally involved were you? Number 5, using the same measure, where on the scale of 1 to 10 would you rate your rational perspectives of the situation? Number 6, how would someone who was less emotionally involved have seen the situation? Number 7, what outcome have you arrived at this stage? Number 8, think of 3 other responses you could have made in that situation. Number 9, how would responding differently have affected the outcome? And number 10, what are your reflections on doing this exercise? We've got the personal stuff now, and it wraps up this chapter. So the personal stuff. At the time of writing, my daughter Ruth is 15. I'm hugely proud of her. Actually, I adore her. But pride and adoration doesn't necessarily always equate to a calm and harmonious relationship. Quite the opposite, in fact. I struggle with clutter. I despise it with a passion. I allow it to stress me out. Ruth copes with clutter. So does my wife Helen. Although I may not be the world's tidiest person, I do like things to be tidy. When Ruth chills out in the lounge watching TV, she likes nothing more than a hot chocolate and the occasional piece of fruit. When it's time for bed, she leaves the room. Alas, her empty cup and apple core rarely do. That frustrates me. I sometimes make a big issue out of it and demand she comes back down and tidies up after herself. In my emotional state, I interpret her behaviour as a lack of respect. I'm concluding that Ruth believes she can create whatever mess she likes and someone else will clear up after her. My wife sees it differently. Helen gives a different meaning to the event. The issue of respect, or in this case a lack of it, does not come onto her radar. Forgetfulness and perhaps a slight degree of laziness on Ruth's part are the reason she believes for the empty cup and apple core. Helen can chill, I can fume. It's the same event, but we can experience very different outcomes, as indeed can Ruth. I place a higher importance on the event than Helen does. Therefore, I respond differently. But it's just an empty cup, an apple core. It's not quite conifer trees, and I won't take Ruth to court over the matter. Certainly not at this stage, anyway. But the seeds have been sown whereby a small and relatively insignificant event has the potential to escalate. Now, if you're a parent reading this, I think you will fall into two camps. Some of you do think I've got a point, don't you? Ruth should be tidying up after herself. She needs to be taught good habits. Others of you are on the same chill pill prescription as Helen. You're thinking, what's the big deal? Do you know what? Both views are right. You will learn more about this in the Sumo Principle, Remember the Beach Ball. The above example is not seeking to determine who is right or wrong, but to illustrate how events or other people's behaviour can be perceived or interpreted differently. I guess that's why playwright William Shakespeare wrote in his play Hamlet, "Nothing is either good nor bad, but thinking makes it so." So what's the way forward? We've seen how habits, conditioning and emotions can influence how we see and therefore respond to events, but what do we do now? Are we simply prisoners to our past? Do we really have much control over our future? Self-awareness can unlock the door to a brilliant life. The key to success is having the awareness to appreciate, in the words of the French novelist Anais Nin, we see the world not as it is, but as we are. It's recognising that we see events through our own mental filters and give our own meaning to those events, a meaning which may be very different to someone else's. However, the Sumo Principle will help you see the events in your life perhaps differently from how you're currently seeing them. They will help you challenge your perception on your perception of yourself, other people and life events. By seeing differently, you can respond differently. Sumo wisdom. It's not the event, but the meaning you give the event that determines your response. Success is about recognising the role we play in influencing the outcomes we and others may experience by understanding the effect of our responses. Success is about waking up to the fact that the equation to life is not E equals O. Success comes when we become more flexible in our responses and explore alternatives to our usual way of responding. The journey to success gathers real momentum. The journey to success gathers real momentum when we embrace the fact that in most cases we can choose both how we see the event and how we respond. The purpose of the following 6 Sumo principles is to help you see and understand yourself with greater clarity. The Sumo principles will equip you with insights, ideas, and the inspiration to take different actions and make different choices to create better outcomes. They can help you to developing healthier habits, to freeing yourself from negative conditioning, and to managing your emotions more effectively. If you want to know where the journey to succeeding in life begins, it begins with the formula E plus R equals O. So let's explore our first Sumo principle, which will both challenge and equip you to achieve those better outcomes. It's time to change your t-shirt. Sumo summary. Shut up automatic responses. Move on to recognising you can make some different choices. Shut up, E equals O. Move on to E plus R equals O. We will go back over and I shall tell you what they mean. Okay. Whereabouts is the explanation of it? So I spoke about the aggressive. It's the event, so your reaction is your outcome. Event plus reaction equals outcome. All right, I remember. Shut up, old harmful habits. Move on to making some better new ones. Shut up unhelpful conditioning, move on to new way of seeing the future. Shut up being a slave to your emotions, move on to managing them. Okay, I think it's time for me to shut up now. The next chapter is change your t-shirts. Okay, I'll see you guys for chapter 2 when I see you. Until then, take care. Thank you for joining me. Much love. Bye for now.